like to invite Reverend Spaldi for our invocation.
God, creator of all there is and ever shall be, we ask you to send your blessings down on our city, or our council, all our city workers and our residents. We ask that you enable us all to work together for our city to grow and prosper. For this we are thankful. Amen.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Y'all may be seated. Mr. Licari, can we do roll call?
Mayor Scott Tremblay,
Present.
Vice Mayor William Dittmer,
Here.
Councilwoman Jenny Sorrell,
Here.
Councilman Todd McClary,
Here.
City Attorney James Matthew,
Here.
City Manager Vincent Lupo.
Here.
This time I want to approve council minutes or address it with the council.
Motion to approve council minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And do we have any, a list for the comments from the general public? Yeah, no worries. Thank you, Sal. Mr. Mueller.
Dave Mueller, Mueller, 5439 Blue Point Drive. Thank you all for letting us have this opportunity to address you. I just wanted to make a couple of comments and observations. About 2 weeks ago, we had a very heavy downpour. And the area that I lived, I had an opportunity to firsthand walk that area after a rain. And by the way, the city utility guys were out in force, and we certainly appreciate that. They were trying to do what they could to alleviate the flooding that was occurring. What I did notice is the pond or retention area that is just east of Old Post at the Quist Canal. There was probably a 2-foot drop between the west side of the road and the east side of the road. It happened to be low tide that day, so the water was trying to get out as fast as it could. I took video of that and I got pictures of that, and I had the opportunity to discuss that with some of your utility guys and made them aware that those pipes were still not large enough to accommodate the water that was all pent up back in there. I walked that entire area. I went south on that road and noted that the drains and the ditches on the east side of the road and the west side of the road both flow under the road back into that retention pond instead of going the other direction. I would have thought it'd been easier to do that, but they do flow east and then north to the pond. Walking from the canal north, there was several drains all the way to the corner of Bay. All of those were overwhelmed. And there again, I think that truck that you guys were getting repaired is probably something that could accommodate that, blowing those drains out into there and trying to alleviate some of that. I still notice that the drains that accommodated the tree limbs or the tree leaves, I guess, are still plugged along Old Post Road. So that's something that needs to be accommodated. This is something that I know that there was some concern expressed about identifying those areas in the neighborhoods that are subject to flooding, and this is a prime example. One of the things that I'd like to make a recommendation is potentially having citizens in the community like myself designated to maybe be as an observer in some of those areas to help call attention to the areas that need maintenance. And there again, I believe it's a community effort. You know, I'm not pointing fingers or anything. It's every rainstorm, we got to go back and address the drains because stuff floods and picks up. But to the extent that we have extra eyes in the neighborhoods, I think it would be a worthwhile cause to try to look for some community involvement to help at least point to where the problems are and get it addressed in a timely manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mueller. Any questions or comments?
No, just recently, we had returned to us the Vector truck, which many of you have seen in operation if you were there at the 4th of July celebration. Yesterday, in fact, we deployed that Vector truck along with many of our employees at the corner of Old Post and Bay after speaking with Mr. Witten and his neighbors to ensure that that underground connection was in fact clear. It was. We blew it clear. We used our truck. We also altered part of the drain, and you'll see that it's drained much quicker along Old Post from what would become the, hopefully the Ridge Road extension, to alter that drain so it flows properly towards the Brasher Park and towards the State Park area. So that flow was altered to go towards that direction, which took off some of the pressure at Old Post and Bay. We continue to work on relieving the areas that was just discussed by Mr. Mueller, the drainage swales, and we're working on two other areas to alter some of the problems that we have had. We're taking a very proactive and aggressive stand towards that, something we haven't been able to do in the past, but we are now. And I thank you, Mr. Miller, for pointing out that area to us.
Thank you. The next person I'd like to invite from the general public is Thomas Brown.
Thomas Brown, 7436 Candlelight Court. At the last city council meeting, Mr. Schatzel announced that in this fiscal year, $503,000 went from general fund into the CRA fund. All entities of the city government must get approval from the city manager, the city council, or sometimes both, to spend more than $1,000, except the CRA board. Any expenditure the CRA board wishes to make must be approved only by themselves. If the city wishes to spend $300,000 on dredging without city council or city manager approval, all they have to do is take the money out of the general fund, where expenditures must first be approved, and put it in CRA fund, where only the CRA board approves its own spending. I have been told by people in top government positions that the state allots CRA funds to the county with little to no oversight as to what the county does with it. Then the county allots CRA funds to the city with little or no oversight as to what the city does with it. Then the CRA board spends CRA funds with no oversight from anyone. Is this any way to run a state, county, or city government? The city of Port Richey should not budget CRA funds in the upcoming budget to pay employees' salaries. The intent of the fund is to eliminate blight and slums in the city. Thank you.
The next person I'd like to invite is Mrs. Pat Rogers.
Pat Rogers, 4838 Sunset Boulevard. I just have one little question. When you make a turn and go west on Limestone off of Pier, there's a speed limit sign there that says 25 miles an hour. All the rest of the signs say 20. Is there any reason why that can't be changed to the proper number?
I'll have the police chief look into it.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers. And the last person I'd like to invite is Pastor Leonard Lord, please.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and Mr. McClary, welcome to council. Lord bless you for serving our city. My name's Leonard Lord. I pastored 8114 Leo Kidd Avenue for about 24 years, giving my heart to see how we together can love on the city and make it better. And that brings up our annual backpack, back to school bash, and Sal has one of these for each of you. I don't know if you've gotten it yet or not. You might have it. So here it is if you want to go over it real quick. It is Saturday, July 27th, which will give a few weeks before school starts. And as you can see, there'll be water slide, bounce house, food, games, and more, sharing God's love. And we do want to pre-register. What we do to keep things flowing is we meet at 9 for registration, then we give away at 10, 11, and 12, so it can be over at 2. Now, I'd invite the mayor council to come out. What we do is we have a gentleman come in that has done it for Sheriff's Department, Grady Judd. He's done it for Buccaneers. He does some barbecue, and he comes in with a big smoker. So what we do during that time, it's kind of hot. We can come in and have a meal together and get backpacks and minister to the family. So we just invite all of y'all come out if you have an opportunity. And normally the fire department has been a blessing there, and also police department. So it's a good time just to all come together, invite the families of the community, get them equipped for school, pray for them, love on them, and see what kind of needs they have. So if any of you want to be a part of it, let me know. Actually, at Light of the World, the 24th of July, we'll be having a stuffing party. We have stuffed about 2,000 in about 40 minutes, I think, with the things that needs to be done. We have a time of music and have some pizza and stuffed backpacks, and then get them all laid out and distributed to the different areas. And along with that, about, 15, 18 years ago, in Tampa, 140 ministries come together studying what made a community great. And there was a man there named George Otis Jr. This man would hear what God was doing and travel, and so we met with him. And in his documents and so forth, and a matter of fact, if it's in order, Mayor, I have one for you. I gave one years ago to each of our commissioners, because in it shows what happens when a community humbles themselves to the love and truth of God and begin to pray and forgive one another. And now on the Fiji Island ones, you'll find that there was a reef came alive overnight, which they're still studying. Polluted streams were made clear. And it was simply by manifestation of people honoring God and what he says. So here in Port Richey, I know and have studied that we together can make this the greatest city around. Just knowing how to serve one another, love one, and honor Jesus and the wisdom that he has. God bless you. Thank you. And just looking forward to serving. God bless you.
Thank you, Pastor Lord.
You're welcome, sir.
Any comments from you, Mr. Lupo?
Yes, please, Mayor and Council. First of all, I would like to thank all of the participants who took part in our 4th of July 6th event, our fireworks event. In particular, I'd like to thank all of the CAC members who participated. I would like to thank all of the vendors who attended, and I would like to express my sincere appreciation to all of the city employees who were there in force, who made the event what I believe to be a rather successful event. So I would like to thank all of those involved, and to let you know that we are going to begin planning for the next event in the very near future. We would like it to be bigger and better than this one. We have scheduled, and I would like the public to take note initially, it will be well publicized. We have set 2 budget workshops. The first one on Tuesday, July 30th at 6:30 p.m. And the second one will be on August 6th at 6:30 p.m. These are the necessary beginnings to work through our drafts and develop the kind of budget that you, the people, and at this city council would like to move forward with the projects that would be involved in those various budget activities. We will also be coming to you on July 23rd, which is the next council meeting, so that we can prepare to complete the DR 420 state form and set the proposed millage rate for fiscal year 2019. So that's, all of those three events are extremely important. I spoke earlier about the repair of the Vector truck, which many of the individuals saw at the 4th of July event, and we'll be using that as is necessary throughout the city to make improvements in overall drainage. Although the current weather reports indicate that the tropical depression that may be forming out in the Gulf is going to head towards the west, we may receive abnormally higher tides and some additional rain. Sandbags are currently available. They'll be located at a police facility, and sand will be available for those residents who believe they need them. So they will be made available. With respect to our water production numbers, they are, and by the way, in the future, almost all of these reports will be just as that. We'll be using an electronic means so everyone in the audience can see them. Our water reports are indeed, again, continue to be what we expect them to be, given the current situations and the fact that we have been flushing many of the lines in order to ensure a absolute delivery of a good quality water to all of our residents. During this season, our production remains high and our recovery rate remains high, and the statistics are here, beginning with fiscal years 15, 16, and 17, and 18, and monthly all the way through June. This is our monthly report of activities that generally occur. And again, these reports will be shown so that everyone can participate. Also, they'll be placed on our website from now on. So that again, so that everyone, all the audience can participate here or later, even if you're not attending. And it goes through all of the various events that occur throughout the end of June and the beginning of July. It updates all the individual programs, everything from through the administration department, the building department, utilities department, fire department, and the police department, and of course the public works department and its events. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from council?
I had a quick one. I just had a question on the June water report. I noticed there's a slight increase of purchase this month.
Yes, sir.
I was just wondering what that was related to.
Yes, that was related directly to the flushing of all of the lines in order to make sure that the water is absolutely clear and sparkling clean. As you remember, at the last council meeting, I had samples of the water from the various fire hydrants at the far extremes of the community. And in order to keep that water clear, we occasionally have to go out and flush it. Again, I'll repeat, if anyone has any problems whatsoever with any of the two ends, either the water distribution, the water quality, or with the billing, please call our office and contact our billing department or contact the water department. We'll do everything we possibly can to ensure that the service you receive is what you expect and the water quality remains high.
To follow up on Mr. Dimmer's question, how much was the value of that? I see the red bump there.
It's really minimal, well, less than several $100s.
Okay.
One more quick question.
Yes,
I
sir.
know well number 7 was, what's the status of well number 7?
Well number 7 is still being permitted. We are in the final stages of that process. And then there will be some modifications to that well, including some new casing that will be required. So that's still in process.
Any ETA on?
No, we haven't had a report yet from the, because of all of the rain that we've had recently, we haven't gotten in there to do the proper analysis, but that will be coming up very shortly.
Any Any other questions or comments by council?
Yes. On the police department cars, how
Yes,
do
sir.
we stand on that? I know that we've had some repairs and we've had some major breakdowns. Are we pretty close to getting that?
I believe they're almost 95% complete with the 2 new cars. There are just some lettering that's remaining.
We'll pick it up one tomorrow, and one should be ready by Monday, Tuesday next week for the 2 new ones. Are you addressing the ones that we've been putting the money in for the repairs?
Yes.
Yes. Well, I'm also asking, how are we turning them over? Because I know that we've got some cars that are way past their prime and we're trying to replace them in a timely fashion. How are we doing with that?
We've worked some numbers into the budget, and we're
Yes.
gonna look at the lease option this time, because there's fewer cars than we needed initially, so the lease option would be a lot less expensive this go around. And
No,
it
that's the
would-
discussion that we said
we
for
haven't-
our budget. We have it worked in the budget workshops.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments by council? Hearing none, I'd like to move to the agenda. Is there anyone to motion or comment on the agenda?
Consent agenda, sir.
Consent agenda.
Motion to accept the consent agenda?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
At this time, I wanted to move on to council business. The first item on the agenda is the consideration of an investment policy, and I'm going to have Mr. Lupo make the introductions to this particular item.
Yes, I'd like to introduce, we have in the past, Mr. Andrew Laughlin, who's been working with us in our finance department and has brought forward something that's entirely new for our community, something that perhaps we should have done many years ago, but we are now getting to it because we're doing many things to improve our community and the finances of our community. And I'll let Mr. Laughlin go from there. Andrew?
Right. Good evening. As Ms. Lupo said, my name is Andrew Laughlin. I'm with the firm Clifton Larson Allen, or CLA. I've currently serve in the capacity of finance director for the city and have been since February of this year. And first time I'm addressing council formally, so great to be here, and I look forward to our future interactions, both at the upcoming budget workshops as well as interactions in the future beyond. So what I'm here to talk to you all today about is the state of investments for the city, both past, present, and future. So in your packets, you have an investment policy, and you might be wondering, well, why is this policy in here, and what is it? What are its contents? So I hope to address both of those questions through my presentation and assess really where has the city been in terms of its investment results and investment strategies, and where do we want it to go in the future. So let's start first with just the past. We go to the next slide. Just in the last 3 years, looking at FY17, FY18, and then FY19 through current. The investment balance, the investable assets of the city has steadily been increasing over the last 2.5 years. So investable assets about 4.8 million in FY17, 6.4 million in FY18, as of the fiscal, as of date of 9/30/17, 9/30/18, and now as of June 30, 2019, there's about 7.8, almost 8 million of cash available to be invested. And you can see the corresponding interest investment earnings on that historically has been about 3,000, 14,000, and now 12,000 and counting currently. So as I said, investable assets have been increasing over the last few years, and also, if you're aware or not, interest rates have been increasing the last few years. So in conjunction and collaboration with the city manager, we've come to the conclusion we should have a more formal strategy around this and really take advantage of those rising interest rates and yield some of the profit. So if you go to the next slide, what we want to do, and it's outlined kind of in the investment policy, a number of different things, and we'll go through that. But at least in the short term, what we want to do is start investing those that excess cash that's in excess of meeting current obligations, current operating expenditures, and invest that at least in a short-term investment vehicles like local, Florida local government investment pools. And so if you just look at what some of the yields are in these pools today, Florida Class, for example, is about 2.6%. If you go back one, Jocelyn, go back. She's outpacing my presentation. So right now that yield is hard to see, but in the last about 12 months has been ranging from about 2% up to about 2.6%. So if you go to the next slide, I'll tell you what. There you go. So just if we had invested $5 million of our $8 million balance in Florida Class over the last month, we would have earned 10,761. That's off the website from Florida Class. You analyze that, you're about 130,000 of investment earnings. A stark contrast to what's been earned over the last couple of years in the $2,000 to $13,000 range annually. Another one is go to the next slide. Another option is Florida Fit, also Tampa-based investment manager, also kind of in the same range, 2.6, 2.5, 2.6, 2.7%. And the third option even is Florida Prime, also in that 2.5, 2.6 range. So a lot of local government investment pools, regardless of which one we choose. Performance is pretty consistent. Go to the next slide. You compare that to what the city's current financial institution, PNC Bank, has recently offered us in terms of both money market accounts at 1.2% and CDs of varying durations ranging from 1.75 to 2.2%. So right now, if the city wants to keep its money in liquid, either available that day or next day liquidity, local government investment pools are the best outlet for the city. And currently, the city's invested in a low interest-bearing savings account with PNC Bank that's that's currently earning very few basis points, and that's why you see the historical results to date. One thing to note, there's a bit of an opportunity cost to pulling a huge chunk of cash out of the city's operating account and into these investment pools or whatever investment vehicles we choose, in that there's an earnings credit rate, or ECR, that the bank does allow for that offsets bank-related charges. And so I was able to negotiate with the representative at PNC Bank to increase that earnings credit rate from 35 basis points to 75 basis points, and that comparison is on these two slides. Here's at 35 basis points, where the city ended up owing about $399 for that month in bank fees and service charges. And now to this past month, when that earnings credit rate increased to 75 bips, that put the city in a positive rather than a deficit position. So there was no amounts owed to the bank for the month of May. But if we do pull money out of operating cash, then that's less that goes into the earnings credit rate that offsets those bank charges. So there is a bit of an opportunity cost. However, the amount that the city could earn in investment income from that 2.6% of interest compared to the amount you get from the 75 bips from the earnings credit rate, it still makes more sense to invest more any amount that's in excess of operating cash. So you go to the next slide. So like I said, the investment policy is in front of you. Won't go through it in all detail, but just a few components of it. There's a listing of authorized investments. So we're not looking to go off the reservation here and go gung-ho and alternative investments, intending on keeping it safe, liquid, and try to maximize return with that understanding of safe, reputable investments. So here's the listing of authorized investments that the city could invest in according to policy. The composition, we also have risk diversification standards that we incorporate in the policy to say we're not going to invest all of our money into one U.S. Treasury obligation or one local government investment pool. A lot of governments did that back in 2007 and 2008 during the credit crisis. If you're aware, had it in the State Board of Administration, SBA, lost some money when investment managers got a little too aggressive and had some toxic investments in that. So we want to still diversify, so even within the local government investment pool environment, we're saying no more than 70% on one individual issuer or one particular pool. Here are some other highlights. Money market funds can be 50% of the portfolio. Savings accounts, yeah, we could say that could comprise the entire portfolio if we wanted. Non-negotiable CDs, 75% of the portfolio, 25% individual issuers. So that's some highlights in the policy on how we want to minimize our concentration of risk. Next slide. There's a couple other requirements that we have in there. One's a reporting requirement, so biannually at March 31st and September 30th every year, the finance director, myself, will make a presentation to you all and provide you with a portfolio report giving you a summary of investment performance to date. And then also there's education requirements will be required. It's standard in most investment policy language adopted by municipalities that there's both a reporting requirement and an education requirement that those responsible for making investment decisions obtain 8 hours of investment-related continuing professional education each year. So the policy is pretty standard. If you look from city to city, you'll see a lot of the same language in there, so there's nothing drastically different than you'd see from a neighboring city. But like I said, our intention here is that you'll approve the policy, and then from there we can start executing on that investment strategy and start earning some better return on our available cash. I'll address any questions if you have any.
Yeah, I have a quick question. I see here on the CDs, they're showing about a 2.2. What's the exposure that we're going to get for less than 0.5% in those other funds at 2.6? I mean, do we have a loss exposure in those other funds? I know the CD is a fixed.
Local government investment pools are as safe as they can get, minus the massive credit crisis, like I mentioned, in 2008, when all Florida governments were, or not all, but most Florida governments were invested in the State Board of Administration, and there were some toxic investments in that. But since then, that was a massive learning opportunity, and there was since then a host of a number of different local government investment pools that have entered the market. There's a lot to choose from. They have to meet specific liquidity requirements. The actual portfolio cannot be invested in anything that's
So it's
unsafe.
not fluctuating with the markets, is what I'm saying.
And it's valued at amortized cost, so it's in a dollar, out a dollar. So there's no market value fluctuation risk that could happen there.
Thank you.
I'd like to emphasize that this is an opportunity that the city has not had in the past. We've moved to a point in our growth and in our finances where we can, in fact, move in a very positive manner to capture additional funds that would normally just be laying there in a bank at a minimal return rate. There is very minimal risk to the city. If you approve this policy, we'll move forward and put a reasonable package together and provide reports back to council so that council can follow and can visually see the impact that this policy will have, a positive cash flow for the city. I request that the council considers approving this policy.
I had a question. It goes back to Mr. Demers' line of questioning. If the market were to crash and we had monies in CDs versus the other monies that he was talking about, would there be any risk of loss with the CDs, even on a market crash?
Well, the CDs need to be in, according to the policy, the CDs need to be in non-negotiable with what's called QPD, Qualified Public Depository. So there's insurance there for investing in CDs of a QPD. But again, based on the nature of the investments in those local government investment pools, we're talking very short-term, U.S. government-type securities. They're not invested in stocks or corporate bond, junk-rated bonds that these are high-value, AAA-rated underlying securities within those local government investment portfolios, and they're liquid, and that's why they're valued at dollar in, dollar out amortized cost. So from a risk perspective, CDs versus CDs in a QPD versus in the local government investment pool, quite negligible on both ends.
Yeah.
It's just you're earning right now, and that could change in the future, but right now, based on market conditions, there's higher earnings potential in being invested in investment pools right now than what the bank could offer. And right now, if rates stay the same or trend the way they are, we're looking at $120,000 to $150,000 of potential investment income compared to the $10,000 to $15,000 that the city's earning now.
But the risk is the same either way, whether
Whether you're in bank products like money market account, savings accounts.
Will that still fall
CDs.
under FDIC for those funds if we have a large CD? Does that, or no?
Well, you're insured for FDIC, but then also under the Florida Qualified Public Depository, the QPD program, we're insured where
So we have the same coverage either way, is what you're saying?
Same coverage, yes. You're fully collateralized for any loss in being invested in a CD.
Isn't the insurance on a CD capped?
That's personal, I think.
I think it's also for governmental, isn't it capped on a CD for insurance?
Like I mentioned, if it's a non-negotiable CD invested in a qualified public depository, you're under the Florida QPD program, you're insured for the entire risk of loss, any potential risk of loss for a CD.
Okay.
So it's an insurance carrier then carrying
The way the QPD program works, and I'm happy to provide you with more information on it, all banks that participate in the QPD program would assume that loss if there's any one member bank that suffers a financial loss.
For government treasury, which is the risk-free rate, what's the current rate, interest rate?
For government treasury, risk-free rate, I can look that up, I'm not sure offhand.
I'm just trying to get a comparison, because government treasury's risk-free rate, government's there forever. If it's 1.5% versus 2% or something for a nominally greater risk to the funds, maybe that should be something that should be considered as well. It's an allowable investment, so that's why.
Sure, and typically, if you see a government that invests in treasuries directly, it's a managed portfolio, so we'd have a portfolio manager that would invest a chunk of those assets for the city. And I'm not discouraging it, that's certainly something that can be explored. Typically, you see portfolio size a little higher to go that managed portfolio route and invest directly in U.S. Treasuries and then in agency securities. So at least pending your approval, of course, I'd say the best avenue starting tomorrow would be invest in those investment pools that I showed. And keep an eye on the market, of course. And if over time maybe it makes sense to have portions of your portfolio managed, or keep your eye on what CDs are doing. And if CDs at some point overtake investment pool in terms of return, then something we should always be considering.
The reporting as part of this is only at mid-year and end of year? That's the only reporting criteria?
Per the policy as currently written. There are some policies that just do end of year. There's some policies that would say quarterly. It's really at your discretion.
I would just have concern about doing it twice a year, and.
Well, it's not based on market fluctuation, really. It's gonna remain pretty stable, I would think, so.
Unless you have another.
Total crash, but
event,
when we know it.
yes.
Again, we're dealing with a much smaller amount than a huge managed portfolio. What we will be doing is looking at it from the government-insured perspective and trying to gain the least amount of risk and the most amount of return, and that's the whole point.
Well, the question I would have then is on the motion that we're looking for, we're not committing, we're just saying we want to move forward working with this policy and not deciding where we're putting those funds at this point?
Well, that's something that we're working on right now to come up with the best possible mix, given the parameters that Mr. Laughlin just laid out. And we can come back with a different mix, but basically, we'd like to be able to move forward. The longer we procrastinate, the longer it's going to take us to get the kind of return that we would like. The investment that you see laid out, that strategy laid out, is about the most, Andy, you can pick it up, but it's about the most minimal risk possible out there. And they're all government-approved investments. We're not going into the stock market per se. It's just, these are government-approved means. All big cities and any cities with any sizable incomes are doing exactly what we're attempting to do, but on a larger scale because the residual cash is much more than ours. So we would like to move forward on this program if possible.
I share the same concern as Mr. McClary in terms of not knowing where those funds are or how they're doing on a month-to-month basis, which most people that invest money, I think, would watch their investments month to month, and it's a concern from my end in terms of allowing city funds to go unchecked for that period of time without having statements or someone at least monitoring.
We could do a monthly report. I don't think that's difficult.
Yeah, we'll be receiving monthly statements, and we can disseminate that information to you monthly, or however, whatever frequency you so desire.
Sure.
Not a problem at all.
We can do it on a monthly basis, no problem.
Okay, that's all the questions that I had or concerns that I had.
Essentially, what we're talking about is, capability of earning, what, $150,000 a year
It'd be a sizable difference than
from where we're at now?
what's been being in historically.
Right now, PNC is making the most off of our money.
Correct.
Through a
Oh,
savings
absolutely.
account.
Oh, sure.
Through a savings
Yes.
account.
Sure.
So I mean,
Yeah.
the option, you'd be better off rolling into a CD on 90-day maturities and just keep rolling it than what we're currently doing.
Right.
Yeah, we would be
in
ahead.
comparison.
Yeah.
There's a lot of better alternatives than what's currently at
Yeah.
present. So that's why, to Mr. Lupo's point, we want to act fast and at least.
The investment plan is a good idea, I think. It may just need to be tweaked somewhat with a little bit of reporting oversight or something of that nature.
Yeah, well, once we get into the program and lay it out, we'll make some modifications. We'll come back to council, obviously, and we'll come back with a monthly report. That's
Yeah,
simple.
and is that also doable, moving funds? Is that something that we're fixed to for a certain period, other than when you lock in with CD, obviously? But the funds can be moved around?
You've got more liquidity in an investment pool. It's either same-day liquidity or next day. So you can
Okay,
pull
so
all
we
your
can
money
pull it
out.
and move it.
Yeah.
That
You
makes
can pull all
total
your money
sense.
out, which is one of the advantages and why the LGIP is so popular among governments around
Again,
yourselves.
this is about $150,000, if you want to call it a grant, but with no strings attached. All the strings are is that we follow the governmental procedures. We come back to our council, report where those accounts stand on a monthly basis. And at any point in time, you can change that.
And are those funds that come in from that investment, are they locked into any specific area? In other
No,
words,
they
can
go
those
right
be
straight
used
in.
for dredging or CRA? Or
They go
can we
right
use
straight
money where
into
we
ad
want, correct?
valorem. They go into
General
ad
funds,
valorem, and
right,
eventually you'll determine where it goes through the budget process.
All right. Then I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the proposed investment policy.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time. Thanks a lot.
Actually,
Thank-
we had a motion, there should be open to public.
After the
Yeah.
second, he's correct.
Okay. Did anyone from because no one signed up for it, that's why I didn't.
That's right, yeah. And they should generally, you're right.
Mr. Colombo?
That's right, they should show up. Sorry,
Okay.
you're right.
Bill Colombo, 7810 Cheska Street. As I understand it, the investment pools do have an element of risk associated with it, correct? It's kind of a yes or no. I mean, it or is.
He shouldn't be asking. This is the problem.
Minimal risk, but there is risk. I'm just making a point. I'm simply making a point. We have always had our funds in fixed. Yeah, they didn't pay a lot, but they were fixed. What you're now doing is approving a basket of investment pools, investment options that are going to be exercised by the finance director and the city manager once you pass this. So it's kind of a step away from any place we've ever been before. I've got a bit of concern about that. I don't know about you. I'm not really feeling terribly confident in where the market is right now. I don't know how market tied in some of those investment pools you are speaking of, but you're moving in a direction now where essentially you are moving away from always having money in a savings account, which we know doesn't pay a lot, but it's pretty much guaranteed. You now are opening up a basket of investment opportunities, and you're giving our city manager, Mr. Lupo, who I have faith in, and our finance director, but they are the ones that are going to make these decisions, which monies are going into which pools. You will be getting reports after the fact, but it's a significant change in investment direction for the city. I just want to lay that out and make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? And what I'd like to do is move on to the next item, if we may.
Did we vote on that?
I think you did.
We did.
Yeah, we voted. And the only reason I didn't ask anyone is nobody had signed up, so I apologize. The next item on the agenda is a consideration for bid awards for Channel 1, 18, and 26A, which is part of the Restore Act dredging project. And I do see some people have signed up for this, but before we go there, I'd like to open, have Mr. Lupo open with some general information to the public.
The city has been awarded $667,000 of Restore Act funding for dredging. The city will be reimbursed this amount after the expenditure of these funds. A request for proposal was advertised for 3 channels: Channels 1, Channels 18, and Channels 26A. One bid was received on March 29th, 2019. The city received one bid proposal from Branch Diversified Incorporated. The proposal is attached for your review. Our engineer of record, Dewberry, has determined that Branch Diversified provided a responsive and responsible bid, but did not include spoil disposal costs in their proposal. Those costs have been calculated by Dewberry and included in your agenda package for review and discussion. Essentially, the costs for the project for each canal, including the disposal, for dredging of Channel 1, it would be approximately $629,127.60. The dredging for Channel 18 would be $374,249.96. And the dredging for Channel 26A would be $433,618.36, for a total of approximately $1,436,995.92. Again, the grant is approximately $667,000. So given that, the channel individual costs, you would be able to accommodate Channel 1, which is essentially in front and diagonally to Channel 18, in the amount of $629,127.60. The other 2 channels at this point in time are essentially out of our economic range and different from the grants as proposed. I can give you other facts and figures that are here, but essentially that is where we stand. The issues are, and what has been approved for the grant are those 3 channels, either 1, either 2, or 3 of them. Any funds left over would be in a later phase, would be utilized in the waterfront district for lightings, signage, road issues. So that is the task before council today, is to consider which of the channels you may wish to move forward with, if any of them. So it's an entirely a discussion before council, and we'll be willing to move in any direction council so chooses.
The first question that I had for you, is it possible to dredge with what money we have in funds plus the 667 more than just one piece, like for example 2?
At this point in time, we have to expend the money which Restore Act says we will get. So we will be paying as we go. So we can only at this point in time accommodate no more than $667,000. That's what the grant funds are. So, and Channel One has been estimated at roughly $630,000. So we can only move forward at this point in time with that channel.
Okay. And just to clarify, some of the cost of that is to remove spoils that are already on.
That, yes, sir, that is built in to the total cost. And that is at a rate of $59 and I believe 30 cents per cubic yard. Is a direct disposal fee to the county. That's part of their enterprise funds. And they cannot reduce that amount of money. I have had discussions with the county administrator, and it's quite clear that it's an enterprise fund, and that number cannot be reduced. So in order to move forward on any one of those 3 projects, you first have to remove the spoils that are currently in the DMMA site to the county disposal site. Then the next channel will be dredged, and those spoils will be brought to the DMMA site to set and dewater so that then it can be removed to the next disposal site.
Maybe I missed this, the $59 that the engineer's estimate for disposal, is that required fee?
It is a required fee from the county, $59.30.
Now, in the bid, and here's where my question, one, he has sizable mobilization, demobilization costs, 50% of his contract, which is sizable. And specifically on addendum D, he notes that all spoil, or the contractor notes all spoil material will be properly disposed of.
Correct.
To me, that indicates he's disposing of them, yet the engineer says that disposal wasn't covered.
No, the disposal by permit is required to be disposed of. The original permit had it at a site that no longer exists.
Correct.
So now it must go to an acceptable site
Correct.
based on the engineered amounts and at the disposal rate of the county, which is $59.30.
But my question is, on the bidder on addendum D, attachment D, he filled it in, says all material will be properly disposed of. The bid documents call for permit fees to be covered by the bidder. So are we 100% sure that the bidder has not covered these fees in his original bid? Because we're paying $140 a cubic yard
Yeah.
for excavation and disposal, which is very high.
Jocelyn?
When the engineer questioned the bidder about how they proposed the cost for the disposal, they were operating under the assumption that the spoils could be taken to a commercial site that they owned, so there would be no disposal costs. That was their assumption when they bid.
Okay.
They didn't have a deep enough understanding that it had to be taken to a certain type of classification of landfill.
Class 1 landfill.
It was investigated. There was an inquiry by during the review process. It was an open issue. They contacted them for clarification. That's how the numbers came about. We picked up the same thing when it happened.
So this $10 hauling price is to the Class 1 facility.
How much of the 629, 127.60, which is for Channel 1, is removing materials that's already on the waste site? Because in essence, we're paying quite a bit of money for disposal for materials that are already there from the other channel that was dredged, correct?
But it's inclusive no matter what channel you pick. That material must be removed to the county landfill site. So no matter if you choose channel 1, 18, or 26A, or any other channel that was authorized, you still would have to remove the fill from the spoils from channel 19 that have been demucked in the MMA site. So it's inclusive.
I guess where I was going with this is the city's gonna have to pay for that removal even if we don't dredge any of these.
Eventually, yes, sir.
Eventually we
Yes,
will.
sir.
Yeah, so,
Yes.
so I guess what I was trying to determine is what the cost less that is, because we're gonna have to pay that anyways.
120,000.
Is what that.
Approximately.
take.
Okay.
Yeah, that's about right.
So if we shut the whole thing down tomorrow, we
Still
still
gonna
owe
cost us money.
120,000
Right.
in disposal fees.
Correct.
For the soils.
Correct.
Okay. I was gonna open for discussion with the council, I didn't.
Yep. Following last meeting, after listening to Mr. Mariano, I had a brief meeting with him earlier in the week. One of his suggestions was, which I think might be a good way to proceed, is even though we did schedule for upcoming workshops on this, if we have enough time, the scheduled workshop to get DEP, Swift Mud, actually at a round table, not like this kind of a setting, but an actual round table, so everybody can put out their ideas, hear from them. Jack's still under the impression, which him and I went back and forth about, he thinks he can get it done under the flooding issue, which I don't agree with, but it doesn't hurt to proceed with Swift Mud and DEP and find that out. So what I would think would be a good way to proceed would go ahead and set up one of the workshops in a roundtable format where we can invite the actual DEP and Swift Mud people to be present. I'm sure we can pick a time when Mr. Mariano and any other county commissioners could be there as well. Because the last format was good for the public, but we didn't get a lot of information that we're still guessing at a lot of information. So that would be my input on it right now until we proceed with, before we proceed with anything. Have that roundtable, lock some things down, weed out some stuff that, there's a lot of stuff out in the public too that I've heard that I've checked into and it doesn't fly. So I think that'd be our best opportunity to straighten everything out, get everything on the table, and then proceed. And that's, I think, the route we should proceed at.
I guess the question that I had for you, and I've looked around and I can't find anywhere ever in the history of Florida and Swift Mud where they've actually came in and dredged someone's backyard's canals. Never. So and if we had some kind of engineering plan that said that, well, maybe this is possible or it could happen, but we don't even have that at this point. So I guess that's my concern is.
Well, my point to it is having Swift Mud there saying, no, we don't do that, then that's taken off the table. Because like I said, I've heard people talking about several times with DEP and there's money from Swift Mud and there's this. So if we want to put this all to bed, you know, we know we have all the players at the table, we know how to proceed.
Question.
Yes.
Is this two different subjects we're talking about? I mean, I thought we were talking about something that was already locked in. This was Channel 1, 18, and 26 under the previous contracts that we had. And are you talking about a future?
No, I'm saying let's find out before we authorize proceeding with 1, 2.
Here's what the rub is, here's what the issue is. There's been some suggestion, although I don't know if I agree with the suggestion, but there's been some suggestion that the best way to get money from Swift Mud or another agency is to see if they will match the 667 that we have, okay?
Right.
And once that's spent, it can't obviously be matched. The problem that I have with this is I can't find anywhere in the history of the agency where that's ever been done. And if we had some kind of fact to stand on, like an engineering plan that says, gee, if you dredge this canal out, then it's alleviate flooding issues.
That's not gonna happen.
But my concern is crossing funds from drainage and basically stormwater type funds. I don't think those should bleed into dredging projects. I think they're apples and oranges, and they should.
So they're two different subjects here.
That's my personal
And I
opinion
agree.
after looking at it.
I've done the same type of research, but the problem is that that keeps being brought up by our county commissioner. So I'm just saying, I'd like to have it put to bed. Either it's yes, we do, or no, we don't.
The other problem is they're two separate projects, but it's
Yep.
only one pot of money. And we have to decide what we're gonna do with this one pot of money. Are we going to go to SwiftMud, or are we going to go with this dredging program? And we keep saying channels 1, 18, and 26. Judging from this, it's only channel 1 at this point, or.
Correct. That's all we can
so-
afford.
Exactly.
So, we're only down to channel 1, that's the discussion. Do we wanna pay for channel 1 dredging, or do we want to see what we can also get with this pot of money, either through SwiftMud, DEP? I agree, SwiftMud generally doesn't do drainage issues so much as your backyard, back door, back whatever. It's drainage to address a area-wide need, which loosely we can kind of say possibly Old Post in that area, but they are also more interested in water quality issues, which our dredging really doesn't address. So the pot of money from SwiftMud, and I'd love to hear them say no, so at least we can put that to bed
That-
one way or the other.
that
And if
was
they
my
say
point
yes, then
exactly.
That may be a better. The other problem I have with this specific bid is, one, it was only one number. Two, it's a lot higher than most of the other numbers that I've seen for dredging of canals, anywhere from $20 to $60 per cubic yard. You know, 80 to 100 for disposal. I believe on the Hudson Channel dredge a few years ago, they spent $100 a cubic yard. We're spending another 40% beyond that to dredge a lot less soils.
Yeah, but a lot of the cost is bringing the equipment to and from on a
Especially
small
when they're
dredge
from-
compared to a large dredge as well.
Yeah, but on a small dredge, you use smaller equipment, and there's dredging companies around here as well. Well, this responding bidder happened to be from Jacksonville. I don't know if he has any local equipment or not, but if he's gotta bring equipment from Jacksonville, yes, I can see mobilization costs that extreme. I have a problem with this bid in and of itself personally.
I'd like to, I would be remiss if I didn't remind council that this $667,000 is part of an agreement that former administrations made with the Restore Act Committee in order to dredge these channels. It isn't just a general pot of $667,000 to do whatever we chose to do or whatever program we chose to do. It was specifically to dredge this series of channels and not a general catch-all fund. And that was the commitment that several previous administrations had made with the Restore Act funds and signed contracts with them.
Well, let me
That-
ask this
okay.
question. If we were to use the Restore Act funds to dredge, maybe not specifically these 3 channels, in addition to other channels, i.e. the deal where SwiftMud maybe comes up with 50% of the money, we're still fulfilling the general idea of the Restore Act grant.
You would have to go back to the Restore Act Committee and work with the Restore Act Committee in order to ascertain whether or not they would entertain those activities, and if in fact they're willing to come up with additional funds to accomplish that goal.
One of the points that I wanted to make is, under the theory that you're talking about to go to SwiftMud, the money we have for these channels have nothing to do with drainage.
No.
So you're trying to match a fund on a channel that's not even
No, you're right. That
part
would
of the
be-
funds.
That would be like Quist and,
Correct. If Quist were part of this,
yep.
I mean, I think it may be some kind of a stronger argument that, gee, we have to, we have this money to dredge Quist, so therefore, because there's these other issues, maybe we do go to SwiftMud, maybe not. But, I mean, that's the other thing that I look at this, and the problem that I have with going to SwiftMud, to ask them to dredge the Quist Canal, for example, with money that we have that's been earmarked for channels 118 and 26A.
But at this point, it's only going to Channel One.
That's all we can
About the-
afford to do,
So
so.
theoretically, Restore Act may come and say, well, you're only doing one channel, we gave you money for 3 channels.
I don't believe it worked that way. It was a series of channels. If we could have gotten additional channels, we would have added, but
Well,
it was limited.
But is the grant based on completion of dredging of those 3 channels or any one of those channels? It's,
It has to be used with, it has, the grant has to
Jocelyn?
be used with what is put into that position.
so the 3 channels.
You can't jockey from here to here.
Yeah, but we would, if we don't complete the 3 channels under that grant,
You do as much as you can with the money you have.
so that's the way the grant's written.
Correct. And the way there was a remainder that was to go, if there was a remainder, it was supposed to go to
Street lighting.
the
and-
street lighting and signage and
Signage.
stuff for the waterfront overlay district.
So the work associated with the overlay district is also written into the grant?
Part of it,
Correct.
phase 3, I believe.
Yes.
Phase 1, I'm sorry.
Phase 1?
Phase 1.
Part 3 of phase 1, yes.
For the remainder.
Remainder.
The remaining funds. But clearly, we're underfunded, so that's just a non-issue in terms of,
Only in the fact that the Restore Act recognizes the work of the streetlight improvements and everything else is beneficial to the city and to the waterfront, and instead you talk to them about maybe doing that work in lieu of the dredging.
well, I don't know if you'd have to talk to them necessarily. I think if you wanted to use it for that,
The
we probably
overage
could.
will be able to use it.
So so this pot of money could, well, I'm seeing a, no, I'm
it's-
seeing a
yes.
yes.
You really need to tell them what you know.
When we initially applied for the Restore Act funding, we were approved for channels 1 and 18, and then the remainder of the money could be used for streetscaping improvements in the waterfront overlay district. That's what we were
So
approved
it's
for.
written as a remainder can only go to,
Because the costs were unknown, the exact cost of the dredging were unknown.
And these exact channels, in other words, every step of this procedure has been followed and approved by them. So we've already have approval on these 3 channels that they met the phase 1 of the Restore Act. So in other words, there's no question if you approve 1, 2, or 3 of these channels, they're gonna pay that money. Okay, they've already committed to that. Okay, as long as every T is crossed perfectly in every lot. You make one change in direction, we cannot guarantee, and they've said this to us, quote
Yes, they
unquote,
did.
the payment of any monies. The city has expended $250,000 to get to this decision.
So we can, say we decide to go with just, let's knock out Channel 1, we got the money for it, that's $630,000, we have $667,000 in the pot, which theoretically will leave us another $37,000 to work on the waterfront overlay district.
potentially another
The
60.
lights and the.
I highly doubt that it will come within 5 or 10% of that figure. Okay? These are estimates on how much is gonna be taken out of the ground. We could end up with 100, we could be overpaid by a certain amount. That's what happens in every dredging. So it's not
So
gonna,
are
it's.
we covered for that then, if they come back and it's?
We're only gonna get $666,000, okay? If we spend 700, we're getting 666. If we spend 100,000 less, we're gonna get whatever we expend.
And where will that additional?
We can apply for an additional 10%, up
There
to
you go.
10%.
Right,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Correct.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a varying number, it's not as.
Well, that makes me
So
feel
there's
better.
another 60,000 that we, I'm
Right,
sure will
correct,
apply
okay,
for.
right.
Question, if we don't
If we
do
did,
this, if we don't do this, could we possibly lose this money?
Very possibly,
Oh,
for one, and you've already
Okay,
spent
so
over
we're
almost.
committed to 118 and 26 with $667,000.
Correct.
If we don't do that, we lose it possibly?
You'd have to
Possibly.
go back and amend. Okay?
Right.
There's
Which
no
means
guarantees.
what, another 2 or 3 years? Because we've been working on
I
this for
can't
2
tell
or
you
3
because
years.
of time, but there's no guarantees. They've told us this many times.
And-
You gotta remember, they've been waiting on this years.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So we have an opportunity now to make a step forward.
Correct.
It seems to me like we should take advantage of this grant and go ahead and step forward with that and get the biggest bang we can out of our buck with it.
Right.
And along with that, on that note, I wanted to point out that Channel 1 is kind of the main channel in 26A that links in front of Hooters all the way down in front of the park into the bayou.
Right
So-
where everybody runs
Exactly.
aground.
Correct. But that really benefits anybody who lives on the bayou who has a boat or any of those channels, because obviously if those aren't dredged, you're not getting to the river, not getting out. So
Right.
I think the community, at least the boating community, has the greatest need for at least Channel 1 and 26, because it directly impacts any of the boaters. And I can just give you an example from doing the boat parade every year. It's always going to be scheduled around high tide because of...
Because of that problem.
Because of that problem, correct. So, my thoughts are, right now we have bird in hand to solve one of our bigger problems, which is Channel 1.
Let's get one.
And then the upside is we recover that money back once we expend it, and then we have it to...
Put towards the others.
To either do another channel or to put to, I think we can use it for whatever we want, once we get that money back. Or does it have to be one of the
No,
channels?
that's
We expend the money, then they give us the money.
Correct.
So we're gonna be out 600 and whatever thousand.
Right.
And then they'll replenish it, and then we have.
Then we have it to...
But where can those funds be spent, is what you're asking?
Correct.
Not quite that way.
Not quite that way.
Not
We
that
didn't
way.
budget for the 650, we just happened to have, you know.
Okay. That's what I was asking.
float
I
to
didn't
do
know.
it, you know, we're more than
I
solid
got
to
you.
do it, but
Th-
we didn't
that's-
budget for the, we
You would,
budgeted for the 337.
you would have to make future efforts with future
We need the
CRA
money back
funds.
to cover that balance sheet.
Okay.
We're writing ourselves an IOU to cover their
Right.
IOU.
Correct.
Basically,
We used
That's
some of
what we're
that.
doing.
yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
All right, well,
Correct. We didn't budget for the 6, that's why we're so
If it falls
touchy
down to
about
use it or
we need
lose
this
it.
money back.
Correct.
I'm all for the using it.
yeah, me too.
At least Channel One would provide something for the public and the general residents.
And the other bonus is we're paying 120, which we're gonna pay anyway, so,
We gotta get rid of it, right.
so we gotta get rid of that.
Well, from this, you're gonna have 2,500 back, so are we paying, it's 600 plus the 120,000, so it's actually 740,000 according to this, or we leave 2,500 cubic yards in
For the
DMA
next time.
For the next time, that may
Right.
never come.
Right.
May or may never.
No, no,
No,
no,
no,
it
no.
doesn't quite work
The-
that way, no, sir.
The 620 is already
That
baked.
includes them
already-
moving the second.
That includes-
That includes the additional
Yeah.
2,500
Yes, sir.
cubic
Yeah.
yards.
So
Well,
we'll be
then-
starting with the fresh
Fresh slate.
waste site.
Fresh
Correct.
slate.
Correct.
Yep. Okay.
At this time, before we get to the general public, which we'll
Is
get
there
there,
a motion?
are there any motions?
Well, I'd like to make a motion for this, awarding the bids for, I guess, Channel One.
Second.
Before we vote, this is something that some people signed up for, and if you haven't signed up, if you have any comments, we'll certainly listen. The first person that signed up was Mr. Mueller.
Such a pleasure.
Dave Mueller, 5439 Blue Point Drive. I think it's unconscionable to move forward with one bid. Todd, you're right on point. We gotta have multiple bids. You don't pull somebody out of Jacksonville, you pick up the phone and you dial around this county, Hillsborough or Pinellas, and you address that with somebody to provide a reasonable quote. Second.
Why do you believe we haven't done that?
I heard from you personally, we have one quote.
Why do you believe we did not try to get more? Why do you believe we did not go out and make phone calls?
Make that comment. I'd like to.
I'm making the comment that we used day and night to try and get people to bid on this project. We did as much as we possibly could to get more bidders. You can't go out and put a gun to someone's head to bid on a project. But we did, sir. We tried to get as many, obviously, the more bidders we could get on a project, the better it would be to come to my council and say, these are the different bidders. We only received one, and that one was thoroughly checked by our engineers and risen up and down the chain, all the way up the county and federal government and back down again.
Well, I think we need to move forward and look around a little better. I don't think it's prudent to move forward
I just wanted
with
to
that.
make the point, sir, that we did make that attempt. It wasn't just,
It-
we didn't
that-
do anything and sat back and got one. That's all,
That-
Mr. Miller.
I'm sorry if I didn't
No, that's
hear
okay.
that. That was not conveyed, and those are information that should be conveyed to the group.
I agree, sir.
And I would like my time restored for
Sure.
his comments.
Sure.
Because I still have some
Certainly. No-
other
no
things to
problem.
address. Obviously, you indicated you can't revise the scope of that particular grant. Or maybe we can. I don't know how long this thing's been festering. It's been out there for some time, correct?
Correct.
By previous councils. There was a comment made about the other disposal site is no longer available, which was somehow factored into the plan of where you were gonna get rid of the previous pile of dirt, right? What happened to that?
It was, what's the name of it? I forgot the name of it. Waste management? Yeah.
They're a C and D site now, not an A.
They can't accommodate that.
They can't accommodate the spoils.
I think there's some other opportunities there. Somebody needs to look at potentially finding alternatives for that as well. I don't know if it can be used for fill or whatever. Certainly.
Chemical analysis dictated it to be set at that site. Different materials that were in there that could not be used on landfill, couldn't be used for re-nourishment, and several other issues. Consequently, the only site that we could use was the county site at $59.30.
Next on my list, is it possible to incorporate those spoils that are acquired in the current bayou and relocated or shifted within the bayou to create a spoil island per se that could be created as a rookery for wildlife and that kind of thing? Has that been a consideration? That way you don't transport it 2 times, you transport it once, and potentially that area right across from
The
Seaside.
engineering requirements from DEP would take, what, years to get any kind of approval to do anything like that.
There's another problem typically, once you disturb contaminated soil, you have to dispose of it. You can't just move it, because then you're contaminating another area.
It gets disturbed on every rainfall right on out.
Not our
We
regulations.
could bring the fireboat right there and give it a really, a great opportunity to kind of see how those pumps work. But I'm just trying to come up with some ideas. I know it's frustrating for everybody, especially when you get one bid. I mean, that's ridiculous, and we need to push it again. Anyway, thank you for your time.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, Mr. Mueller. Sandy Spalding?
Sandra Spalding, 8612 Green Street. Hello? We put it out to bid how many times? We got the one bid back, okay? Are we gonna start wasting time again and lose our permit again like we did years ago? We have the grant, we have the permit, let's just get one done. Let's step forward. You know, the city's supposed to be stepping forward now. Well, stop procrastinating and step forward. We put everything out for bid. We did all that over and over again. I've lived in the city maybe too long because I remember it all. You're gonna step backwards? Remember, we're supposed to be stepping forward with the city. Let's move forward and do it. Everything is in place. Get over yourselves, just do it, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Spalding. Ms. Rogers?
Pat Rogers, 4838 Sunset Boulevard. I just have a question on how long those spoils have to sit in our holding area before they can be moved to Pasco County.
They're ready to be moved now.
Yeah, but once they're dredged and put there, how long do they have to sit?
It depends on the volume that's there until they're dehydrated, partially dehydrated.
Thank you. Those were, I think that's everyone that signed up. Are there any other comments? And we'll, Mr. Colombo first, and then.
Bill Colombo again, 7810 Cheska Street. Just a little background too, because I was around when Jocelyn was working hard on that. The original Restore Act grant that we were approved for, out of the Pot 1 money that comes from the U.S. Congress Restore Act down through to the counties, who are the ones who plan on how those funds are distributed, and the reasons they went to channels 1, 26A, and 18 was because Pot 1 monies were intended to be primarily targeted towards waterfront activity generators and waterfront business areas. That's why those channels were picked. Included in that package, that original package too, was also putting a boat ramp in Waterfront Park and boat parking. So there was things along with sidewalks, lights, and streetscaping in the Waterfront Overlay District. There were a lot of components to that particular project. If you go up to the Restore Act site, the actual federal site, I've heard Mr. Dittmer and Mr. Mayor speaking about drainage issues. There are a lot of Restore Act projects that are being financed for drainage purposes. There's a small city down in the Keys, I believe, that's getting $1.4 million from the Restore Act. But if you look at all, and there are quite a few stormwater projects, but virtually all of them revolved around buying property for retention, deep water injection wells, ways to keep the water, untreated water, from getting into natural waterways. So yes, you can get Restore, because there are like 3 other pots floating out there in the future. Restore Act money can be used for drainage, but again, along the lines of what you said about SWIFMUD and DEP and the Restore Act, they always revolve around primarily how to keep untreated stormwater from getting into natural waterways. So I think that's something to keep in mind. One other thing, point that you made, Councilman McClary, too, about the differential in funds of disposing of dredge material from Hudson and dredge material from Port Richey. Hudson was a county project. They tend to cut themselves better deals than they do us. Just some oversight. Yeah, I was around, when we were working through all these odds and ends. We originally thought we were going to do all the dredging, DMMA site, plus have multiple boat ramps and turn Nichols Park into an actual park. That was part of all the original plan. And we were going to do all that with $667,000. But you got to understand, the Restore Act planning started probably in 2013, maybe 2014. So I mean, things have changed. It's a lot more expensive to do right now. And some of the original dredge engineering preliminary dredge cost estimates that we got back in 2015, the economy hadn't really climbed out of the hole. So the contractors were willing to work a lot cheaper than they are now. They're busier now. Prices go up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Colombo. I saw some other hands. Ms. McClary?
Sherry McClary, 8731 Betty Street. I just want to address the single bid. I am in alignment with what we've been heard. We're hearing a lot of anecdotal comments that we did go around, we did do this, we did do that. I think it would be very beneficial for the public to see where they were posted, when they were posted, and who did the engineer actually go out to locally and solicit bids, because that's what he has the power to do. So I'd love to see that list of the local contractors that dredge that the engineer went to solicit the bids, because that's really what should have been done. Why would you want to pay $10,000 more for your car? You wouldn't. So why would we want to pay more than we need to for dredging? We would want some competitive bids. And if they were done, then I'd love to see the list made to the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McClary.
Actually, I have one more question. It was said that this was bid out before. How many times had this been bid out before?
These channels have never been bid out.
So this is the first-
This particular element of the project has.
This package, yeah, this is the first time this ever
Yes.
been bid?
Mhm.
So it could be thrown out and rebid for being over budget too. That is a choice.
We have till October, I think, on our
October 1st.
permit. So we're going to start.
With 1-year extension.
Point of order there, I think this particular canal extends to 2022.
The Corps permit is from 20 to 23, and the DEP permit expires October 1st of 19.
But there's an extension available till 2020.
Move to get an extension, which we have done.
Mr. Burke, I saw a hand as well.
Kenneth Burke, Washington Street. First question is, who tested the dredge material?
Certified
And
laboratory.
determined it had to go to the county site? Who tested that? The county?
No, sir. It was independent testing agency. And
Independent of who? The county, the dredger, who?
I don't recall the original name, do you? But it was an independent testing.
Well, I, for one,
Pardon
would
me?
like
Ardent testing.
another one would
Ardent
be,
testing. Ardent
another one would be
testing.
in the works. Because at $59 plus to haul it off, and if it's unnecessary at that cost, and we could use it for someplace else, you might want to get another determination on if that is actually needed to go to that county
It
site.
is part and parcel of the contract that the soils be tested.
The parcel?
It is part of the contract.
It's
that
part of
those
the
soils-
contract
Yes,
as the dredger?
yes.
But once it's been labeled a certain toxicity, I don't think you can go back the other direction.
But it'll
So-
be consistently tested. It has to, it's
Correct.
part of the contract.
I think once you're labeled with it.
Right.
Well, we test it as we take it out.
Right.
Constantly test it.
So just to follow up for discussion, if we dredge and they say that we can dispose of it in a different manner.
It's C and D.
We'll save money, of
Then
course.
you
Then you change.
But I
Right.
think we should budget for the worst.
Well, the engineer's putting in that it's all hot, bad soil.
Right.
Right.
And if
Correct.
You get better, you get better.
Correct.
Correct.
But until it dries out in a DMMA, he
You
won't
don't know.
Correct.
Correct.
Mr. Smith?
Joel Smith, 7335 Candlelight Court. As a former employee of Florida Dredge and Dock, I can speak with a little bit of authority. The cost of bringing equipment from Jacksonville, if it's built into the engineering, it is a major part of what it's gonna be. Of course, Florida Dredge and Dock does major product. They did Lake Panacope. But, like I said, it's a major undertaking, major expense. If there was any way around it, going, I know you've already gone through it once, but maybe it's worth looking at again. Because that expense is something that does nothing good for the city. That's all going to the contractor. Like I said, there's just something to consider. Have you thought about leasing a dredge long-term and doing it in the city itself?
There were different proposals brought up long before I got here, and few previous councils reviewed them and then decided against them, including purchasing of a dredge, hiring people. They were part of those discussions I have no knowledge of.
Yeah.
But again, the mobilization costs are built right in here.
Yeah.
Apparent for everyone
Part of
to
the
see.
problem that we have too is we're kind of locked into the nature of the way the funds sit. And I don't think we can just go out and buy equipment, because I don't think that was ever contemplated when we applied for those funds. Now, if we were gonna take money out of our general funds, or we were gonna assess the general public and then dredge, then yes, I agree that we could consider all those things, but I don't know if we can for this particular dredge. And I agree with you that the cost of shipping all that equipment's probably $100,000.
I would
It's
guess
probably a
more-
big chunk of it.
I would guess it's more than that.
50 and 50 for Channel One.
So, and if we could afford to do 26A or 18 along with one, I'd love to do it. I just don't see where we could do it without affecting, pulling money out of ad valorem or general funds, and that's not something that I would recommend or be willing to do at this point.
Yeah, I understand. One question, I think Bill touched on it. When did everybody's talking about previous administrations. When was all of this started, this current contract? A proposal?
2013?
The negotiation.
2014.
So it's pretty current. It's not something that was done a long time ago and,
5 years old.
okay, okay. Thank you very much.
Mr. Brown?
Thomas Brown, 7436 Candlelight Court. I have a couple of questions about the $667,000. City manager said that former council specified that the $667,000 Restore Act money could only be spent on dredging. I've attended about every city council meeting since 2014, and I don't remember that stipulation being in any city council meeting. And then Councilman Dittmer goes on to say the $37,000 left over after dredging Channel 1 could be spent on waterfront overlay district. How could that be if the money is specified to be spent only on dredging? Well, something is not making sense here.
And if I may, it's the way that the Restore Act money, the grant money was given to us, and it was given to us with certain direction. And that happened back in 2013, 14 when we applied for it. And the direction that they gave us is you can use this money to dredge these 3 canals, and if there's any remainder, then it can be used for the development of the water overlay district.
Correct.
So we're bound with the confines of the way that we receive the money from the grant. So there's no way to, well, I guess we could try and rewrite that, but right now we have bird in hand with grant money. So, you know, I would be unwilling to go back and try and undo that.
Then the Restore Act, not the city council, said that it can only be spent on dredging.
No, sir. You misinterpreted it. Tom, Mr. Brown, the money is specifically for dredging. If we do not use all of those funds for dredging, then the residual can be used for street light, as one of the phases, can be used for street lighting, signage, and others within that 667. It's a 2-part item.
But the majority would have to be spent on dredging.
Dredging, yes, sir.
couldn't spend $100 on dredging
The
and spend-
primary is dredging, sir, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
To ask another question, in the original bid documents, they have you dredging to, I think, 6.5 feet below mean low water, which is quite deep for our channels. What if we don't go that deep and have some more funds left over, dredge Channel 1, hopefully it gets down to 400,000, and then we have some money left over for the waterfront overlay district? Because spending all this money, if on a single bid, is quite extensive, and we're getting very little return. I mean, we're getting what is one channel, and Channel 1 is not that big, to be perfectly honest. Yes, it addresses a problem. Maybe we can address the problem and get some additional funds for the waterfront overlay district. We've satisfied our Restore Act requirement that we've dredged something.
And have the residuals.
And then we have more residuals to do something that would be more beneficial to the other businesses. Since it's in the Restore Act grant, we're just satisfying other parts of their grant.
The question I have that I wanted to direct at Mr. Lupo and Jocelyn, if we were to go back with this, even just with the same bidder and adjust what the dredge is it possible to reduce Channel 1 enough cost-wise so we could do Channel 1 and 26A? Which would be all the, or 1 and 20, or 1 and 18, I guess, so either one of the
You won't
two.
get them that bidder low enough to do both those channels. The
So-
only way you're gonna get any efficiencies if
Change the engineering.
change the engineering, rebid it in a more competitive environment. That's the only way you're gonna address, that bidder has no reason to come down.
So if not, the only upside to doing that would be to have a little more residual money for the.
For the
For the
waterfront
lighting and the
overlay
water.
district.
Correct.
My recommendation and vote would be to either rebid the bid or talk to Restore and see what else we can do. Because we are getting very little return, looking at this right now, in my opinion.
Do you guys have any more questions, comments, discussion?
When you say changing the engineering, you're like saying instead of going to 5 feet mean water height, you would go to 3
Well,
feet
you're
or
going, yeah,
what?
you're going before.
You're gonna
I mean,
change
a
that
maintenance-
depth?
A maintenance dredge is 5 feet below mean water, mean low tide. This engineering says 6.5 feet to 7.5 feet. So if you think about it though, 2.5 feet over the length of a channel
Is a lot of material.
is,
A lot of
it's
material.
not a lot of material, but it's
No.
material.
But it's our main channel coming in too, so that's where all your commercial boats are coming.
Shrimp boats.
Your shrimp boats are coming through there, so I would think that would have to be the deepest out of all of them.
If you're
Well,
talking,
the shrimp
mean
boats
low,
could
you're
take
talking
the
5 feet at
600,000.
mean low, and I don't think any of those shrimp boats are keel boats that draw more than 3 feet, maybe 4 feet the most.
And don't forget, it's 5 feet below mean low water, so.
Mean low water, right? It's way down.
It's way down there.
Yep.
It's not on an average zero tide, or it's mean low water, so it's fairly deep.
And then the odds that we have to dredge again relatively quickly go down, and the deeper we dredge, I would think too, so.
Yeah, but then you're talking about a maintenance dredge, and once you get back into a maintenance dredge, it's a whole easier deal to move forward with a maintenance dredge than the initial dredging of a.
And really, on a maintenance dredge, then you're just taking it about
The
down
soft
to
stuff
what
off
you
the
had.
top.
Correct.
No, I mean, yeah,
This is a
it's
maintenance dredge.
It's a maintenance dredge.
In addition, you must understand
It
that
is
your
defined that way?
Yeah, it's defined under a maintenance.
in
Theoretically, we're
addition,
only allowed to do 4,000 cubic yards per year under a
Oh.
maintenance dredge.
in addition, you must remember that the DEP permit expires on October 1st of 19. Although we are applying for an extension, there's no assurance that we will get that extension. We've had all of these permits extended and extended and extended. But in fact, we just authorized our engineer, Dewberry, an abundance of caution to go ahead and apply for an extension. No guarantee that we'll get it.
Is there a short-term bid process? I don't know if we ever done anything like that, 30-day or?
All the federal requirements, Jim, you can speak to that.
With regard to the question, is there a short-term bid process? The answer is no.
Okay.
First of all, just for the council's edification, when I took over as the city manager 3.5 years ago, I was going to put it out, I forget what the bid was for, in the newspaper, as had been done in the past, and did a little homework and found out that that's being a dinosaur. And after much study, probably 90% of every bid goes to the Florida Purchasing Group. It's done on the internet. Everybody that bids on anything uses it. It's the highest level used by every major city. We put out the bid in the broadest manner as any city in the state of Florida, I assure you. We've gone to training. We've actually been threatened to be sued by outside vendors because they have such a monopoly on the bidding process. Okay, so we do that, and I assure you, I can tell you that the bidding process of the Florida Purchasing Group is as big as it gets, and there's nobody even in second place. As far as a short bidding process, as an attorney, when I hear short bidding process, I hear that's not good for us. You want long bidding process. Your choice here today, whether you do it or not, I'm not trying to sell it one way or the other, but one thing I'm sure is this went out for as much of a bid. Now, the fact that one person bid, there's many reasons for that, okay, none of which may have to do with being the city of Port Richey. We have problems with people bidding on anything here for a multitude of reasons, mostly because it's a rather small job. But number two is, we were in the newspaper a lot as this was going on. You could talk to Dr. Martinez, the calls we used to get about these bids as this was going on. Your choice here today is to reject the bid. You can, it's just one sole bid. You could reject the bid. You could put it back out to bid. If you're going to put it back out to bid, I recommend a long process of 90 days to gather bids if you want more bidders rather than less, unless somebody here knows someone they want to call friends. When I hear that, I get my hair in my spine goes up. I assure you, the federal government has been here, eyeball to eyeball with me and Dr. Martinez. This is being looked at, this bidding process is being looked at by the federal government. They sent someone here, eyeball to eyeball. You will go out to bid. We told them who we're going out to bid with. They like that, and they will analyze the bidding process. They will not agree to a short-term bid. Whatever process we do. So I'm just emphasizing that. And my concern is, I don't know how much longer this money's going to be there. Just from the nature of so every time something happens there, Dr. Martinez, I, and Mr. Lupo speak to these people, and the only 2 groups in the county that got these awards out of 38 applicants, and the other's been done for a year. They want to know when we're finishing. So I'm not forcing you to do this, but if you want to reject this bid, that's okay. You want to go back to them and redo the engineering. This is a maintenance bid, is how I saw the the permit, so I don't know whether 5 feet or 9 feet, I don't know, I just read that in the permit. You want to go back to them and say, what do you charge to do something else since they're the sole bidder? We could do that. You would need engineering plans. We can't figure that out. We just call an engineer, so you'll have those costs associated with us. To redo those, then you're going to have to take those engineered plans, go back to the Restore Act, and see if they'll approve them. That's your choice.
The other comment that I wanted to make is the only way that we're gonna get to phase 2 and 3 of potentially getting more Restore Act money is if we spend this as it's supposed to be as part of the plan. And obviously it was underfunded, so I'm sure that's one of the things that we'll, bring to the attention as we had planned for applying for more money to utilize for other projects that are in phase 2 and 3. So that was the other concern that I had, is I don't think we can move forward unless we spend the money.
Do I see a timing problem too? If we put it out for the long bid for 90 days, by then it'd be October 1st, and we have no guarantee of the year extension on that time,
Correct,
and we could lose it all.
correct.
Which then we lose phase 2 and 3 if we lose phase 1.
Exactly, so there would be no moving forward after this if we lose this.
Correct.
If we lose this money, there's nothing else we can do.
Correct.
And correct me if I'm wrong, though, the phase 2,
Microphone.
the phase 2 of the Restore Act funds, you can put in a separate plan for Restore Act funds. It just couldn't be the phase 2 of this plan. It would be another pot of money, another request, correct?
You would have to go to the Restore Act Committee, you put together a proposal, and then the Restore Act Committee would then evaluate it along with all the other applicants.
Correct.
And so it's up to whatever Restore Act Committee wants to do.
So it's not like we lose funds forever or never have chance of getting any funds again. We would just have to put together a separate plan and start from scratch.
But
But
right
if
now, we
we
have
don't
funds
do-
earmarked for our city, that if we lose and we have to go back to the drawing board, I think the odds that we get more money down the road, they go down.
How responsive is the Restore Act to questions if you were to say, I'm getting chuckles, so I guess
That's
that's,
pretty much the answer you'll
that-
get.
that's pretty much the answer I get.
I don't think they've met in a year, have they, Jocelyn? See, I don't, just so you understand the bigger picture. Federal government has the Restore Act money, okay, the BP money, okay? They administer that through the county, okay? And the way they do that is they set regulations, as people watch these things, because it's a big pot of money over here, but it's being given out over here. And so they say, well, first you're going to develop a Restore Act committee, and we'd like one of this, and correct me if I make a mistake, Johnson's an expert on this. We want this kind of person, we want an engineer, we want this kind of person. They put together this whole group of 30 or 40 people. Now, there was probably an ad in the paper, I'm sure it didn't go to the bidding place. There's a political comment in there. And certain people then replied, okay, I didn't see it, but all those 25 people on that board all got there, okay? And then they talked about, should be related to flooding and things like that, and what all the purposes are. And there was 38 plans, and of all the 38 different places where this money could have gone, Port Richey was number one, and was one of the two, and Newport Richey was the other. The other 36 was rejected. There are 3 phases to it. This is the first phase. Once you've gone through this money, you can then go to the second phase. At any time, if we wanted to change this, anything we want to do, we want to go and amend it and go to the darkness hole and amend it. They meet, I don't think they've met in a long time, they'll have a meeting with all these people, and whether it'll come back 6 months later, I don't know, but I'm just telling you that amending it is a slow process. But once you're through phase 1, we have phase 2 technically approved, but that money hasn't been granted yet, from what I understand. We have to apply, so that we have to put it, you can look at these documents that were done. You have to go in and apply for that, whether we're gonna be so lucky to be the top 1 or 2 out of 38 again, or how many people are gonna apply, we have no idea. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's not just.
Yeah, theoretically, we're not even guaranteed your phase 2 money.
Correct.
Oh, no, far from, not in any way. No, matter of fact, the feedback we're getting is that because it's going to be an extreme uphill Well,
And if we turn down the phase one, then they'll look at us and go, you didn't want it in the first place, so why
yeah,
should
you
we
see, you're
bother
coming
with
in
you
at the end of a
again?
very long trip here. The city has expended $1/3 because we're getting $2/3 of a million for free. And so now we've expended that money on this, and now here are, get our money back, money we haven't budgeted, we're gonna, okay? And to get it back is free, and so the administration's a little sensitive about in any way walking away from that, unless, but you're the council, you just need all the information.
Any, let's, discussion for council, questions for council, anything further?
I have nothing,
Motion and a second.
Yeah, you got a motion.
We have a motion on the table.
And a second.
In a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Nay.
All opposed?
Nay.
Sal, just poll. Take a poll, please, for the record.
I have Mayor Tremblay for a
We
yay.
want you to take a poll, ask each one of them how they want to vote.
I'm sorry, what?
We want you to take a poll, ask this gentleman who he's thought, what's his vote.
Okay. Vice Mayor Dittmer?
Aye.
Councilwoman Sorrell?
Aye.
Mayor Tremblay?
Aye.
Councilman McClary?
Nay.
Motion passes. The next item on the agenda is local mitigation strategy, and I want to turn this over to Mr. Lupo for an overview.
Item number 5, local mitigation strategy. The Pasco County local, I'm sorry, 5 before. The Pasco County Local Mitigation Strategy Committee meets several times every year to review and approve the implementation of the plan's objectives. A local mitigation strategy, LMS, is a plan developed by the county to reduce or eliminate risk associated with natural and man-made hazards. The City of Port Richey adopted a resolution in 2003, becoming a member of the Pasco County's plan. The Community Rating System, CRS, requires an annual evaluation report on the progress made in the past year towards implementing the current plan's objective and/or recommendation. Attached is the 2019 Local Mitigation Strategy Report submitted for your approval. And staff is requesting motion to approve the attached LMS elevation report.
Any discussion for council?
Again, this is part and parcel of a necessity for our community rating system, which affects our insurance.
Any motions?
A motion to approve?
Second?
There's, before we vote, Ms. Rogers, I'll open it for discussion.
Pat Rogers, 4838 Sunset Boulevard. Basically, I put my name there because I didn't know what we were mitigating.
Yes, ma'am.
And my other question is, do the county mosquito control ditches that run through our city have any bearing on any of this? Whether they come in and clean them out or whatever's going on?
It's not part, Mrs. Rogers, this is not part of this issue.
That's why I was,
Okay.
I'm looking, mitigation goes a lot of different ways, so I wasn't sure what we were mitigating here.
Now, this is flood hazard mitigation. It's pro forma.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes. Next agenda item is going to be Resolution 19, update the mitigation strategy.
I'll take it. Make
Okay.
it easier. This is nothing more than a mechanical way that we approve the county's mitigation plan. Every 5 years, they update it. So really, the resolution here, which I'll read by title only before you make a motion, is nothing more than, when you read it, a resolution accepting the county's resolution of accepting the plan. There's a federal law that says every governmental unit must have a mitigation strategy, and it's very long. It's federal law. For us to have one, we'd probably have to hire 2 or 3 people just to do that. The county does it for the whole county. We just adopt theirs, okay? That's what we're doing. And it keeps our rates down, and the building department monitors it and spends a lot of work keeping our insurance rates down. Having said that, I'll read the resolution by title only. Resolution 1901, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Port Richey, Florida, supporting, adopting, and implementing the Pasco County 2019 5-year update of the local mitigation strategy. Looking for a motion.
Any motions by council?
Motion to approve Resolution 1901.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion
Passes. Let's go to item 7 on the agenda, which is the police department SNAP agreement.
Sir?
And I was going to pass that to Mr. Lupo.
The city recently approved the funding allocation of $123,614 from the Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Grant Program to Pasco County. This is a combined mission between Pasco County Sheriff's Office and local municipalities for a street narcotics apprehensive program called SNAP, S-N-A-P. Attaches a memorandum of understanding between the Sheriff's Office and the local municipalities for the implementation of the program. The Sheriff's Office will administer the program. Requested action, a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding.
Just for the record, this is just a pass-through grant?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Any motions?
Motion to approve the funding allocation of $123,000 for the SNAP agreement
And memorandum of understanding.
and memorandum of understanding.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The last item we have on the agenda is the vice mayor resolution. I wanted Mr. Lupo to do an introduction on where we're at with that.
Mr. Mayor and Council, Councilman Terry Rowe has resigned, and pursuant to our charter, section 2.03, the seat is now vacant. A special election to fill this seat is scheduled for September 10th, 2019. The seat shall be filled by a qualified city resident until that special election. You may either discuss the process for this appointment or choose a qualified resident to fill the seat. And the action requested is your discussion for a process to fill that seat, or in your wisdom, to move directly to appoint, in your perception, a qualified resident.
And at this time, I'd like to open this for discussion amongst council.
Well, the last time when we brought Todd aboard was from the pool of mayor. I think maybe we want to revisit and give people an opportunity who may or may not still be interested. We had several people come up last time for the council seat. Maybe we should have them come forward again, or at least put their names up so we know who still is interested in applying for it.
And I agree with that. I think that if we're gonna fill this seat, 2 things. I think that maybe we wanna set a requirement that they meet, obviously, all the requirements for the council
Yeah, well,
position,
that's-
but also set a requirement that we didn't have before, where someone has to at least take the podium, introduce themselves, to be nominated, and show an interest in actually being a council person. Because I remember last time we went through this process, there were people that were nominated that we never heard from, so we weren't sure, number 1, if they qualified, and number 2, if they were still interested. So I think that not only should we, if we're gonna go that direction, that we should set a process and maybe just a couple guidelines, so the general public knows what we're looking for.
We had done this just previous to all of this, and we had 5 applicants that came up and showed the interest and spent 3 minutes telling us their qualifications. So we still have 4 of those people left, since Mr. McClary is now up on the dais with us. We've had Pat Rogers, Claudia Smith, Janet Eckerman, and Caitlin Overbeck. I spoke with Claudia Smith, and she said she'd be interested in a temporary seat. I have not had a chance to speak with Pat Rogers, so she's here tonight, and Mrs. Eckerman and Mrs. Overbeck are not here, so I do not know if they are still interested.
And the other comment is there may be a broader pool to choose from, like I think Mr. Dittmer's point was. So it may be prudent just to set it on next agenda.
To have another 3-minute
Yep.
application process like
Correct.
we did the time before?
Correct.
Okay.
And we can also, Jim, can we also make an appointment from that time, or does it have to be?
The charter calls that you shall appoint somebody. Obviously, if you, shall means you're gonna do it, that's part of doing it. So just decide what your process, if you're going to bring people in next time, because we faced these issues before, if you could address these issues now, it'll make life a little simpler for all of you, okay? People gonna speak, who gets to speak? Just people you invite, or anyone that wants to speak? Question one. Number two is, after they speak, how much time? 3 minutes, 4 minutes, fine. Then the question is, who does the nominating? I presume just the council will do the nominating.
Yes.
Nominations are not from the floor, but you need to decide that. After you make a nomination, does that nomination need a second? Or how are you gonna do the nomination? So you have 7 people speak, gonna go in alphabetical order, that you make a motion, I think it's that person, and then you vote on that? Or does everybody go around and nominate someone? So you'll have 4 people up there, maybe 2 of you will nominate the same person. So that process needs to be discussed, okay? Because I could see it going down the first time we did it. We never got to anything past the motion, but those things need to be discussed. And so if you want to bring people next time, I could go through those questions again, but is it just people you invite as council members to come, or can anybody speak?
I think it should be open
I
to the
think it should
public.
be
Anyone who's
Thank you.
qualified can.
It would be open.
Anyone that's qualified,
Anyone
okay,
that's
so that's the
qualified
first
can
thing you've
come.
agreed
Yeah.
to. Let me take you down the list, okay, so that's anybody that could speak, and everybody gets the same amount of time.
Right.
Okay, so now, after they're done speaking, the council members will nominate someone. Can they only nominate from that pool?
I would say
I
if
would
they don't
think
come
that's-
before us, that would be a.
That would be the fair thing to do for the
Correct.
people coming up to
Yeah.
speak. We
Correct.
can only
Okay,
nominate then
in
from
case
that
someone's
pool.
sick, couldn't make it, and storm or something, they gotta be
Yep.
here. Okay, that's your second one. Are you going to nominate then vote, or all the nominations first? So you have at maximum 4 nominations.
I think we have standard Roberts rules here.
You can do it any way you want. This is a
In general-
process that you're agreeing to, so.
Correct, so I think anyone on the council, which excludes me, can make
No,
a
maybe you
nomination.
could change that for this process. The charter says that you could appoint someone, so you want to make rules, you can change these rules here for nomination. You know, Robert's rules, or you can agree to anything on nomination.
Sure.
So what do you, I'm saying you could nominate, I mean, you're not, should everybody be able to nominate? Do you need a second to nominate? What do you want to do?
But I think that we should do the standard traditional council meeting where the council would nominate. If there's a second, then we vote.
Okay, so in other words, and who gets to nominate first? Him? You understand what I mean? If he
Well, I
nominates
would
fir-
think it'd be fair, we all put up our nomination.
Yeah, that's the, yeah.
And then, for instance, Will, Jenny, we would all put up our nomination, and then we would pull a second from that now reduced pool of people.
Right.
So
Right.
theoretically, there would be 3 nominees.
Okay.
And then we put those 3 nominees up for a second. So that way, it's fair all the way across, that everyone hears and
Right.
sees.
And you don't have to,
Sure.
that way, because when they don't pick someone you would have nominated, they weren't gonna win anyway, so you could leave yourself
Right.
out of the mix, although you could let him nominate.
No, that's fine.
That's the
I'm-
mathematics.
Right, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that.
But it's better to discuss it now. No,
Sure.
This is great, okay.
And then if there's a second, then there's a vote, and there's.
Right.
Then
Once
there's,
there's a second, then
Yeah,
there's
once
a
there's a
vote.
second, then that's the.
Got it, okay,
Right.
all right.
but I think it should be clear that everyone could speak first, and then we do the nomination.
Absolutely.
After everybody
And I
shows
think
up.
we should all be able to nominate to then reduce that pool to the
Yeah.
3
Right.
people,
To
and
the
then.
3, if we have 3 separate
Correct.
ones.
if
Right,
we
then when you
3
have the
separate
second, you could have the public comment about it.
And then the question is is it gonna be a silent nomination to where they don't know who's nominating who? So if they nominate the same person, then we're done.
I don't know, you can do whatever you want, I
And
presume
so-
that's a public nomination.
I would say
assume it's
public.
public nomination.
So you
Nomination, yeah.
guys would each just announce who you're
I'm
nominating?
against secret ballots.
No, they'd be announced after you put down who you have, would announce everything, but, okay.
Okay,
great.
but
That's-
it should be clear that this person's only sitting in the seat until September. So
about
we
five
only
meetings,
have
so-
5 or 6
Yep.
meetings that
And
they're going through
Five or
too.
six, 5 or 6 meetings, plus at least 2 workshops, maybe 3, and 2 executive sessions on the budget.
Correct.
And what? 2, that's what I meant by executive sessions. I meant executive, 2 budget hearings, so it'll be about 10 times.
Mr. Burke?
Kenneth Burke, Washington Street. I think you guys have got a good thing going on with this here, but the time limit on these candidates to speak, don't make it 3 minutes. Make it 2. Because if you're gonna get 5, 6, 7 people, you don't know. So, I mean, 3 minutes, I've watched it, 3 minutes is a long time. So I think 2 minutes is more than enough time for these proposed candidates to express their interest.
Decide that night.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Burke.
I'm fine with 2 minutes.
8, 7 people, 3 minutes, just 1 more minute. That's not
If we get 30
That's all.
people,
That's
we
a
could have
consensus. You don't need
a
to
whole
vote on
night.
that.
Okay.
All right.
We'll have it on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Is there any old business to come before council?
No, I've already discussed the police car thing, which was my biggest interest this evening, so.
Is there,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.